Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Okay, that's good to. Sorry about that. That's good to know. How's everyone doing? Let's wait for a few more minutes now. See some people trickling in. And you can hear me okay, no? All right. Clear naman? All right, that's good. That's good to know. I hope everyone's doing well. I'll share the, wait. I'll share the link to the deck. Wait a minute. Okay, here's the link to the deck. Let's wait for one more minute. I expect this to be a short session as well. Maybe an hour and a half will be long enough already. Most likely less. All right, I think we can start. I'll share my screen. Again, I'll be recording. Yes, recording is on. Let me share my screen. There you go. Can you guys see the screen? The deck? Can you guys see it, the deck? All right, that's good. Okay. All right, so good evening again. Thanks for joining. Again, for some of your classmates might not be able to join. So again, this is all the sessions are being recorded. I'll be posting them online, most likely, usually in the evening or next day. So that's what I like about Zoom. They send a link, so it's automatic as well. So anyway, there's 19 of us, 18 of you. So good enough. All right. So a few announcements before we go to part 2 of Module 3. So this session really is more about wrapping up Module 3, and then just doing a short introduction to Module 4. So as I mentioned and as you saw in Module 0, Module 4 really is the longest one. And I'm expecting more or less 2 weeks. So I hope that most of you are almost done with Module 3 and are about to start or already starting Module 4. Because, of course, as I mentioned, you can learn at your own pace. Oh, sorry. But these are suggestive guides, so that you can manage your time. You can allocate your time better. Let me just get the laser pointer. Okay. In Module 4, the initial modules, initial sections have been uploaded. So just an hour ago, I uploaded the third one. So there's 4 in Module 4. Agri, which covers agrarian reform as well. Fiscal and taxation matters. This is the second one. And third is population and demography. I just finished that and published it on Canvas. And I'll publish SMEs later this week, but at most Monday. So most likely by Friday or Saturday. That's the shortest section in the module. And for the graded assignment 2, I discussed the group assignments. Again, if you have questions or concerns at any point, just either raise your hand or ask it in the chat box or type in the chat box. So Initial list of references have been provided because you have been assigned to your own topics and your own groups. No? So we're following the same grouping as the NSTP final output. So it's at the end of module 4. So pardon, I mean, excuse me, excuse the roughness of that page. No, I just basically copy pasted links that I felt were useful. I didn't formally write the titles, etc. Just rough copy pasting of URLs. So be patient with that. But I expect you to do more, no? Do more research on that. And by the way, for those covering the rice tarification law, I saw on Facebook there is a forum tomorrow. I think it's 9 or 10. I'm not sure. You can check out the Department of Finance and the Department of Agriculture websites. There's a forum on rice tarification law tomorrow. Of course, sponsored by government. So it's more or less pro rice tarification law. So of course, that's one side. Of course, by doing your own research, you'll explore both sides. But that's useful. And that will feature two Ateneo alumni. No? Si Carl Chua, who's now the acting secretary of NEDA. He was my batchmate in batch 2000 in Ateneo. He was an ME graduate. And the other one is Tony Lambino. He was a batch ahead, so batch 99. He was classmates with Bam Aquino in high school, honor section. So interesting group discussions tomorrow. So if I have time, I might watch that as well. It's on Facebook. Just follow DA, DOF Facebook pages. But the good thing with Facebook Live is if you don't catch it live, you can view it a few hours later or anytime later. So just announcements. So yeah, before we start with with module 3, this was something shared to me by your classmate, your bidder, Andre. Uh, he mentioned to me that some people were saying that the modules so far have been quite long. Selected modules, they didn't specify, quite long and can sometimes become overwhelming. This was my answer. I'm not sure if Andre actually forwarded my answer to you guys, no? But you can browse my entire, because you have the link to the deck. No? You can read my entire answer. But basically what I said was, I think most of the students are referring to Module 4 because I think many have finished Module 3, even as early as midweek last week. No? Because I saw a lot of people posting on Lino Wall already. So it's really Module 4 that's long. And that's on purpose. That is really meant across all SocSc13 courses, classes. That's really the longest, no, among all modules, because one of the reasons is the 3 topics, 3 out of 4, are required in the syllabus, in the description that Ateneo sent to Chet. We're really supposed to cover agriculture and agrarian reform, public finance, fiscal, and demography, population. And I inserted, and I will be uploading very short, sub-module on micro, small, and medium enterprises at the end of module 4 because you guys are JG SOM students. That's very relevant for you guys. So what I did really, believe it or not, I tried to distill the core topics in each of theirs and really try my best to shorten and compress them. And unfortunately, the debates and the issues surrounding agrarian reform can no longer be shortened because there really are a lot of outstanding and really important debates around it. And that is really I think the most technical, the most difficult among all, especially the reading by Dr. Fabella. But what I try to do really, as you've noticed, is after each assigned reading, I try to summarize to the extent that I can and try to pepper the module with really short articles and easy to digest videos. So that's usually what I do. No? So I don't want to compare, but if I compare myself with other SocSc13 faculty, they have really extensive sets of reading materials. Me, I try to keep it short, but plenty, short articles, but plenty. I think the only long reading I assigned was Dr. Fabello's reading, as well as the poverty one, the Oxford one. But those two things. Other than that, I think I try to keep it as short as possible. The readings. Uh, so again, it might be overwhelming because some of these are new to you, but I try to simplify to the extent that I can the content with summaries. So rest assured, as I uploaded the population one, well, the agriculture section that's really long. Uh, Public finance is okay, relatively speaking. The third one, I just uploaded population. It's just 5 pages. Some assigned readings, but it's much quicker than the rest. Then SME section will be very brief. I've started drafting the actual Canvas pages. So my suggestion, if you haven't gotten my response to Andre, is basically I stole this from other SocSc13 faculty. So if you want, you can share the load. So within some modules, within sectors, or within the entire module, you can divide, or you can among your groups, among your friends in class, you can divide it up. You don't have to read everything yourself. That's the ideal thing, by the way. If you can, it will be useful for you, not necessarily now, but even in your future career. You can, if you want, divide the readings, provide summaries, and share that with one another. So that will minimize your time spent on readings. And that's actually how many law students get by. No? That's how they handle the heavy reading load. But remember, again, you're not economics students. So in many of these cases, prior economics knowledge is really useful. No? But again, I don't expect you guys to when you read, I don't expect you to master all the concepts, especially their economic concepts. What I really want you to do is, what are the main points and takeaways? You don't have to memorize all the terms, but what really are the main points and takeaways? And I will add, no, and the way I try to help you guys digest the material is really to review and further elaborate during our synchronous sessions. Again, as suggested by, recommended by Ateneo, the administration, most of the learning will be in Canvas. And the point really of these synchronous sessions is to complement, to further elaborate if students have difficulty in digesting material. That's why whenever I say, oh, if you have questions, please feel free. If you want me to elaborate further, if I'm going too fast, please let me know. Because I don't know if you guys are digesting it well. But especially for very technical topics, I will try to repeat, illustrate to the extent as possible during especially the synchronous sessions. All right. Any questions so far? Any other concerns? Don't be shy. Yeah, it's fine. No? I can take feedback. No. But my point here also is, let me make this point. I have high standards. Why? Because you guys are Athenians. I'm an Athenian myself, so I know. No, I mean I know that you guys can be challenged. You know, it's not being mayabang. No, we're Athenians. It's like I know you guys can take on challenges, no? And reading. I mean, it's not bad to be exposed to long readings. So the ideal thing is you yourself, each of you, go through the readings. But if you want to lighten the load, then you can share the work. But I'm challenging you guys, especially with assignment two. No? The reason why I assigned it is I know it's kind of difficult, might be new to most of you, but you guys can, you can be up to the challenge. All right. No more other issues, concerns. If I don't see any chats, I'll just continue. Let me see. All right. All right. I can't wait. Sorry. I can't seem to. All right. All right. So I don't see any questions. All right. So module 3. So last week we talked about the first part. um, and I hope most of you are almost done or done with module 3. Uh, don't worry. One student asked, will I close module? I will not close any modules throughout the course. I may opt to close some of the discussion boards uh, soon. No, I haven't done that, but I will not close any of the modules. So don't worry about it. So again, going back to module 3, last time we talked about Harold Domar, Rostow, Harold Domar, as well as the free market or market fundamentalism paradigms. And this will wrap up module 3. We'll go through the structuralist theories, go through what we're experiencing in the Philippines, the Marxist and neo-Marxist models, especially dependency, and we'll end with module 3 with donut economics. In a sense, it's going back to the point of Dr. Sachs. Okay. Just a review before we go back to Lewis. When you say structure, no, economic structure, you can simplify it by, when you say economic structure, the basic elements of an economy are made up of 3 sectors. It's agriculture, manufacturing, and services. The reason why Lewis only focused on 2, no, agri and manufacturing, that was in the old days. That was in the 60s or 70s even. So services wasn't a big deal yet. So they dichotomized the sectors into 2 only. So again, as I mentioned, there's 2 ways of computing GDP. Again, GDP, think of GDP as the total economic output. It can be viewed as the total economic output, what the country has produced, or the total economic income. It's used interchangeably in economics, by the way. So it's either the total. That's why some international books or reports call it GNI, gross national income. Could be GDP, could be GNP, because there are nuances. But the bottom line is, you can think of the GDP as economic income of the entire country, or the economic production or output. And that's how you compute GDP. If you remember the first part of module 3, one computation is through the expenditure side, what you buy. So it's C plus I plus G plus NX, if you remember that: consumption, investment, government consumption, as well as your exports. There's also another way, we call it supply side. It's what the economy produces. It's 3 broad sectors: what agriculture produces, what manufacturing produces, and what services produces. Just to define what services is, agri is easy, diba? Manufacturing, just for the sake of simplicity, think factories, industries, processing. Services, those are things that it's the opposite of goods. Goods kasi you can hold on to. Services are experiences that you get or you buy. So for example, when you say services in the economy, kasama na yung call centers dyan, that's a service, by the way. You can't hold on to customer service. Financial services, tourism services, if you have tour guides, that's a service. If you have bus operators, that's a service. Just to define terms. So how is it related? I'll explain how Rostow and Lewis are related later. But just a recap of Rostow. Again, Rostow had 5. This is very relevant to Lewis as well. I'll explain later. You have 5 stages of growth. You start with agri, and then you start to develop a more process-oriented, manufacturing-oriented uh, economy, and then you reach age of high mass consumption where people produce a lot of things and then they consume a lot of things because they have money, and then that entices the producers or the manufacturers to keep producing more because people are buying. So that's the final stage. So in essence, if you connect that to the economic structure, it's traditional society, agriculture, then becoming largely manufacturing, and then services. That's sort of an indicator that your economy is already more or less developing if there's a lot of services involved. The share of services in the economy is actually large already. All right. So Lewis, the dual factor. Now let's explain this, and we'll have an example later, the China example. All right. So again, Lewis defined it, described it into two sectors, agriculture and industry. So his belief was there was a lot of surplus labor in the countryside. In economic terms, it's called the contribution of additional labor is what you call marginal productivity of labor. If you have surplus labor, then that means that surplus worker is no longer needed. His contribution, if he will join, let's say there's a farm, there's 10 people working, and they can do the job. If you add in an 11th person, another person, and the production is the same, then that person is not needed. The marginal contribution or marginal productivity of that person, of that labor, is zero. It's surplus, hindi ka kailangan. It's excess. Remember, whenever you see the term marginal in economics, that only means additional or incremental. That's all. That's an important concept in economics. So so Lewis believed that in the countryside, especially for less advanced countries, there's a lot of people doing nothing basically, because there's lots of surplus labor in the countryside. The farms are awash with people, and then in the urban areas, there's industry. Industry and manufacturing are synonymous. So when I say industry, manufacturing, always think, to simplify in your minds, what it means: factories, manufacturing. So his belief was industries, because in the urban areas, cost of living is higher, wages are also higher. So his belief is the industry, because they have higher wages, would attract and pull in rural labor, those who are considered surplus in the countryside. So what they get attracted, because a lot of people, even in the Philippines, if you see now, most people in the provinces, their ultimate dream is to go to Manila and work here. Some of them just don't realize it's actually hard to live in Manila sometimes. So what happens is that's a cycle that keeps continuing. So industry, they keep attracting the surplus workers because of the higher wages, and then they get profits. Of course, when you run a business, you expect profits. So what do they do with the profits? The profits are flowed back to the businesses as investment. Remember, we talked about investment, the term investment, quite a lot last time. So that investment will expand the business, and lo and behold, they need more workers. So that expansion requires more workers. So they keep getting from the rural countryside. So that keeps on happening. Tuloy-tuloy lang. And then there is what they call a turning point. They called it now the Lewis turning point. Eventually, industry is able to mop up or get all the surplus, no, not all the labor in the countryside, but all the surplus labor. There's no more excess workers in the countryside. Now what happens? So now what happens is in the countryside, there is the tendency, and this is also based on empirical evidence, rural wages now will tend to go up. Why is that? Because there's no, number one, if you remember your basic economics, there is your usual law of supply and demand. When something is scarce, I always take the analogy water versus diamond. That the reason why diamonds are expensive because they're scarce. So if something is scarce, including labor, including people, they become more expensive. There's a tendency for the prices to go up. So that's one explanation. The second explanation really is it's more practical. The industry in the urban areas, they offer higher wages. If I'm a farm worker, I'm not excess, no? I am actually needed here in the farm. So what will keep me from leaving the farm and going to the urban areas? You have to pay me higher. Because you don't have any surplus workers there. They're already there. The only ones remaining in the rural areas are people who can be productive, who produce output that matters. If I'm the farm owner, what can I do to make my workers stay? Kasi ubos na yung surplus workers. It's actually the people who are working, who have a job, who can get attracted to the urban countryside. The only way I can incentivize them to stay really is to pay them a higher wage. So that's sort of the tension. Labor becomes scarce, and now if you force people if you want people to stay and not leave, then the tendency is for rural wages to go up. Then on the flip side, at the same time, soon after, now urban wages also go up. The ones in the manufacturing side. And why is that? Because when rural wages go up, there's now more incentive for the farm workers to stay. So there's the tension. What will now incentivize them to uproot and go to the urban areas where it's more expensive is to pay them a higher price. So, and you'll see in the China example, this actually happened. So there's that tension, rural, what would prevent them from leaving? It's higher wages, and then at the same time, what will attract them further is higher wages as well in the urban countryside. Before we go into, so what's the point? What's the implication? Why are we studying Lewis? Before we go into that, let's just run through some of the criticisms. I should have discussed the second one first, because I think that's the most important. But the first one, as I mentioned, Lewis assumed that businesses, when they make profits, they will flow back the profits, invest, expand, and then they'll need more workers. But that's not always the case. One, they don't necessarily reinvest profits. They can just pocket it or keep it, not reinvest in the business. Second, they can actually invest in equipment that will replace workers. So that's not a good assumption to begin with, because it doesn't happen all the time. Second is they don't know, the researchers, the experts say, they don't know where Lewis got the idea that there's excess rural labor. It's not empirically sound. They haven't seen any country that really has excess rural labor. And the final criticism really is agriculture and industry can actually coexist. Let me explain that further. And you'll see this in module 4 when you're in the page talking about agribusiness and value chains. Agriculture, when we say agriculture, that's basic crop production or fisheries. When I say agriculture, that's broadly speaking, that covers agriculture, crops, fisheries, livestock as well, no? Poultry, pigs, etc., cattle, and forestry, timber, if you're selling trees or whatever. It's basic production. If you go into food manufacturing, banana chips, virgin coconut oil, then that no longer becomes basic agriculture. Now it becomes industry. It ceases to be agriculture lang, just agriculture. It becomes manufacturing, it becomes an industry. So it can coexist in rural areas, or there can be a symbiotic relationship, because manufacturing, especially food manufacturing, as you'll see in module 4, is dependent on agriculture. So there can be that strong link, and they can actually coexist. They need not be mutually exclusive. So what's it good for? There's a lot of criticisms. It's good for, number one, it's really good, no? Because again, following Rostow, it's a good description, sort of accurate in general terms. Of course, there are exceptions, nuances. It's a good description of what usually happens. As we've been talking about, if you want to advance economic growth, grow the pie bigger, there's emphasis. You talk to all economists, experts. There's an emphasis on manufacturing. It's really manufacturing that drives growth. And even for agriculture, they're pushing that it's no longer just basic agriculture, it's commercial agriculture and agribusiness, processing, manufacturing. So it's really advocating for a shift, a focus in manufacturing. So it's extra emphasis. That's what it's good for. It provides a good recommendation. Second, it actually is a good good explanation also of how wages move, how they face upward pressure at times. So in this case, it's basically saying, scarcity of labor here, it means it tends to go up, and then it also forces wage rates to go up elsewhere. And we'll see an example later. And that's how it's related to Rostow. So it's really focusing here without forgetting about agriculture. The point is, you don't forget about agriculture, but you also find ways to modernize agriculture so that it becomes part and parcel of your manufacturing. More in module 4 when you go deeper into agriculture. All right, as you saw in Canvas, China is a good model of having reached the Lewis turning point. Now, I want you to tell me why. I'll explain what this picture is all about later. That's an actual picture, by the way, in China. Who can tell me, who can explain now, and I want a volunteer, one or two, who can tell me why China is a good model of the Lewis model, Lewis theory, and of the Lewis turning point, the phenomenon and the Lewis turning point.
Sir, I can
who
check.
can tell me? Yes, I hear someone. Sorry. Yes, Jericho? Go
Uh,
ahead, please.
I'll try lang, sir. I think it's because,
Can you speak louder, Jericho? Sorry, I can't.
sorry. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Sige, if you can speak louder pa.
I think, sir, it's a parang it's a model of yung Louis turning point kasi parang in the video talked about like how parang their general population parang the is getting older in a sense, parang there's an older demographic in a sense, and other than that parang there's an increase then in more urban populations because of their policies put into place that would try and push people out of the countryside, and that's why parang it shifted nga from like parang it shifted from the countryside to more urban living in China. So I think
Because of because of what again, Jericho?
because of the there are like policies po that were like pushing people out of the countryside in a sense. So I think
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, that helps. Anyone else would want to add to that? You're actually on the right track. Anyone else would want to add? Shy group, huh?
So I can try to add then ulit.
Sige, sige. Go ahead.
I'm
Sure.
not sure if this is correct, but I know there was like parang there was something to do with rising wages in a sense, which may cause in nga, problems with businesses being competitive, and parang there are like manufacturers may decide to base themselves elsewhere. Kasi yun nga parang because some countries were their wages were decreasing in a sense, and ayun nga because people wouldn't really want yeah parang due to lower pay parang people want to like base themselves elsewhere, and yeah that can be one then, sir, and also because yun nga parang businesses were trying to avoid paying too higher and of wages, so yeah that's one another factor.
Thanks, no. Really good, no, because you discussed the implications of what happened, and that's in the video as well. Thanks a lot, Jericho. No? So I'll discuss it now, and thank you. Your first point, I'll just complete the loop, no, on your first point. But I'll explain this picture. So this picture, before I discuss, no, um, this picture is a picture of China every New Year. Chinese New Year, di ba? Sometimes you have it February kasi we also observe it here, di ba? Public holiday pa nga. So because there are so many rural workers uh, who migrated to the urban areas to work in factories, there's really a mad rush every time Chinese New Year happens every year. So the week before or the weekend before, I read somewhere that more than 100+ million people go back to their home provinces in China every Chinese New Year. So imagine that, more than the Philippines' total population, they move back to their provinces for a visit. Parang Holy Week natin, but it's supersized. You know, it's like times what? Times 10, times 100. So that's basically a good jump off point with our discussion. Thanks, Jericho. Thanks for that. No? And he was right. No, basically it's a combination of different things. No, it's government policies basically to really again emphasize manufacturing, and that's sort of because China is the factory of the world. No, from low tech to high tech, from inferior goods, mga mga fake goods in Green Hills or Quiapo, all the way to very sophisticated stuff like solar panels, your cell phones, the laptops. You know, all of the devices we use now are manufactured in China. You know, your iPhones, your Android devices, all of those are made in China. They're designed elsewhere, but China is the factory of the world. So China, since decades ago, they decided we will really specialize in manufacturing. And you know, by the way, just as an aside, linking back to your lesson on human capital, China really emphasized education. Now they have a lot of PhD people, scientists who are really good at high tech stuff, and that really also enabled them to become high tech. Because before, no, they were just producing simple stuff, shoes, bags. That enabled them to move high tech. So now they're known as the factory of the world. What happened, and that was because of government policies, as Jericho was saying. It wasn't really that government forced rural workers to the urban areas, but because they created policies that promoted manufacturing, especially in the urban areas like Shenzhen, for example. A lot of rural folk, because they had higher pay in the urban areas, got attracted, no? So that industrialization attracted rural migrant workers. And that's why this is kind of obvious. 100 plus of them go back to their home provinces. So that's how many they have, at least that's how many they have attracted to manufacturing. And that's great, no? Because again, that gave livelihood. We're not sure if they were really excess, as Louis mentioned. We're not sure if they're really excess labor, no? But the point is, they were likely poorer in terms of quality of life, no, in the rural countryside. And then they found a better job, livelihood in the urban areas. And the implication of that, no, going to Jericho's point, what started happening was they saw wages both in the rural countryside as well as the urban manufacturing zones increase. And that's a natural phenomenon. The more productive you become, the more you need workers, then ultimately that drives up the wages. Again, law of supply and demand. Once something is scarce, you know, you can be sort of an economist every day as long as you remember the law of scarcity. When you analyze in the newspaper stocks, peso exchange rate, it all boils down to supply and demand and scarcity. Just a tip for all of you. When you're reading economic stuff, it all boils down to scarcity and supply. So what happened? What's the implication? So the wages started to rise. And Jericho is right, you know, especially for the low tech manufacturing, you know, the companies say, oh wait, now China's wages are starting to increase. Wait, you know, neighboring Vietnam, they have the right infrastructure as well. Their government is friendly, but their wages are cheaper. Then I'll just transfer to Vietnam. So now China has retained the high tech stuff, but you know, some of the lower tech stuff are starting to lower tech manufacturing have started to shift. Bangladesh, Vietnam, some in the Philippines as well. No? So that's sort of a downside as well. In general, wage increases are great, but for people, you know, we talk about poverty, income, poverty threshold. That's good, no? But if they increase too high, and we're talking about international competition, what can happen, especially if your economy is heavy on exports, then you can face competition outside. And that's the risk as well. But the good thing with China is they specialize in industries that don't have a lot of competition yet. High tech. It's Vietnam, Bangladesh, they're not high tech yet. Philippines were not high tech yet. So at least they can keep that. No. And that's another lesson in Lewis and Harold Domar. Diversification, in Rostow, by the way, diversification. You diversify, low tech, high tech. And this really proves that manufacturing can really be the driver of growth and can really be the one to employ a lot of people. So again, the implication in China was they, at least for some sector, they lost competitiveness. some companies started to ship outside. But there's still the factory of the high-tech world. You know, all of your Samsung, iPhone phones are made there still. Still. And the lower budget ones, Huawei, Xiaomi. All right. Again, economic structure is agri, in broad terms, agri, manufacturing, services. What about the Philippine economy? Did we follow Rostow? Did we follow Lewis? If you examine us, and it's funny, you know, I just heard in a webinar this morning, sponsored by Philippine Chamber, and this was actually echoed by the Finance Secretary in his speech this morning at the annual forum of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce. The sad thing in our economy, we leapfrog. I used this term, and he used this term actually this morning. So the usual, as I mentioned earlier, the usual pattern, the usual trend of all advanced countries is they move from agri first, then they have a robust and diversified manufacturing sector. And that's the time they move to services. Tayo hindi. We jumped. No? We did not really experience a manufacturing boom. And I provided links in Canvas. So many economic experts are saying, and that's one of the reasons why we haven't really progressed that much. Because we did not really go through this phase. And the government, and even the previous governments, have been trying to actually emphasize this. Because manufacturing really drives economic growth. Again, manufacturing is synonymous to investment. Harold Domar, diba? Investment is key. And employs a lot of people, as Lewis keeps mentioning. And it creates a virtuous cycle because manufacturing is the one that can produce and produce and produce. Services kasi, it's tied to our point about consumption versus investment. Once you consume a service, that's it. No? At least manufacturing, it's sort of, it can regenerate, it can keep producing, it's continuous. It creates a virtuous cycle. So this is the share of the economy now. Advanced economies like Singapore, the US, you see a similar share, no? Similar share. But their manufacturing, while having a smaller share of the economy, it's still robust. You go to advanced economies, Germany, they specialize in a lot of manufacturing. Singapore, definitely, US, France, you know, their manufacturing base is strong and robust. Tayo hindi. It's not deep. This is an entire course no, in macroeconomics, so I will not expect you guys to understand more beyond this. But just again, the basic point of this discussion is we missed the boat on manufacturing. We moved to services already. We did not follow the recommendations of focusing on manufacturing. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Put in place the infrastructure, make sure there's power, the utilities are in place, you have the right taxes, you'll learn more in Module 4, etc., to incentivize manufacturing here, whether domestic or foreign. All right. No questions? All right, just let me know no, if you want me to elaborate. So what about Karl Marx? No? You know, Karl Marx is sort of the god of communists and socialists. But Marxist really wasn't that evil to begin with. What he offered actually was not, his vision was not really bad if you think about it. There are flaws, no? But his vision was not bad. His advocacies were not necessarily bad. It was the implementation of his vision that became bad. Like Russia, you know, they used violence They use authoritarian modes to implement Marxist vision. But that wasn't really his vision. It wasn't through violence. So let's discuss Marxist paradigm. So Marx was famous for basically uh, viewing capitalists or capitalism as evil, intrinsically evil. So basically, capitalists, they're the ones, they're the rich ones exploiting workers. No? But he saw that, businesses, even though they're more powerful, it's really the workers who are, if you think about it, the most important. Because without workers, without the working class, he was specifically referring to blue-collar workers. Without them, the capitalists won't get money. No? So they're needed. So it's the key word, the key thing to remember in Marxism is there's ex, exploitation happening in the capitalist framework. So his prediction was, his theory was, capitalism, you continue to expand, etc., etc. But then it will stall, it will suffer, businesses will start to go down, they will crash. And then what happens was, businesses start losing profit, they lay off workers. In a sense, what's happening in the pandemic right now. Now there will be riots, class revolts, and then that sort of that anger then turns into advocacy or preference for socialism. Again, socialism, as we discussed briefly last time, is trying to equalize well-being, the outcomes, income, wealth, etc. Not necessarily opportunities. But we don't want that. We want social justice, but not necessarily socialism. So if you connect the Marxist paradigm to Rostow, it's sort of the sixth stage. No, people eventually get tired of high mass consumption. Capitalism doesn't work for people. Capitalism goes down. Then people start to prefer socialism. In a sense, some of his predictions were correct. No, you've seen in the news and based on your readings, economies go through cyclical downturns. That's what they call it. So booms and busts. Sometimes the economy is good, sometimes it's bad. Businesses suffer, they have to lay off. So it happens periodically. But he was wrong in saying that, people will get tired of that and will forget about capitalism. No. What happened was people, they just recovered. Capitalism eventually finds a way to recover, and then people are happy again. So it's a cycle. It doesn't mean that once it's down forever. But the good thing with Marx, going back to his advocacies, his viewpoint might be too extreme, that workers were exploited. It was because also of his advocacies that, some of workers' rights started to happen. If it were not for Marx, we would not have a minimum wage. Before, in the 1800s, there was no minimum wage. The workers would bargain with the capitalists for what wages they would earn. Government did not say, oh, there's a floor, there's a minimum wage. No. It was because of that advocacy of lessening or reducing exploitation that sort of brought about minimum wage. Weekends, before, that was a foreign concept. Now we're used to, okay, thank God it's Friday. No. Before, workers could work around the clock, not necessarily 8 hours only. They can work up to 12, 16 hours. Could work on Saturdays, even Sundays. No concept of those whatsoever. So the advocacies are good. So before we leave this topic, and this is a flawed prediction, but what I want you to get out of this, some of the advocacies are good. It might be too extreme, but take that some of the viewpoints might be good. It's concern for the people, the workers, especially those who have no choice, especially your security guards, your waiters, for example, blue collar workers. Just before we leave, no, just to distinguish between communism and socialism, you might be wondering, they're in a sense they have the same objective, no? Equal sharing of wealth, uh, but it's the how it's administered or how it's operationalized that's different. So for communism, it's like the Russia model before when they were still USSR. Government takes over all resources and they decide this goes to you, this goes to your neighbor, this will be your work, etc. That's communism. That's classic Lenin, Stalin, and you'll get you'll suffer if you don't follow. Marx never advocated for that. Socialism, it's more benign. It's sort of that they want the same objective, but it's still done through a democratically elected government, where they decide on who gets what. So same objectives, same vision, but different needs. So socialism is less benign, more benign. Sorry. All right. Moving on, neo is just a term for a fancy term for new. So neoclassical, it's like a new way of thinking about a certain topic. So a new Marxist view. It's like extending his initial vision and applying it, appropriating it to something else. So that's the same for art. Neoclassical, neo-Renaissance is like using those principles, extending it further. So it's creating something new out of that philosophy. So now there's a neo-Marxist theory. It's called neo-colonial dependence. Remember, Marxist was all about exploitation. So here the analogy is it's no longer rich capitalists exploiting the poor workers. It's actually rich countries, usually former colonists like US, Spain, France, in the case of Africa, some African countries, exploiting the poorer countries like Philippines, the former colonies. So that's the reason why it's connected to Marxist thinking. And it's a new way of Marxist thinking. It's the same exploitation angle, but applied to countries. So the theory is, this one is a very extreme viewpoint where former colonists, they want to keep their former colonies poor. Better to keep them that way. So the former colonies the rich countries will get the goods of they will extract, very extractive, will extract the basic goods, the good stuff from the poor countries. They manufacture it and actually sell it, make money by selling it to the former colonies. So it's even worse. You get something, you steal something, you extract something, you turn it into something as you force them to buy it. And then you provide crumbs. You sort of give them donations. Let's say, during times of pandemic, the United States, my office, for example, they provide money, donations to victims, etc. So it builds dependency. We'll keep you poor, but we'll give you crumbs, so you become dependent on us, and then you still buy from us. So it's a very exploitative, extractive model. And this picture may be a good example of that, of some viewpoints. If you see in the news, when you see pictures or videos of protests, there's always this classic banner, and it's not only for this administration. It's you see it in all protests in past administrations. patalsikin rehimeng US dash whoever is the president. And it's funny, because as you follow Philippine politics, Duterte actually is no longer. He's actually moving away. His foreign policy has shifted away from the U.S. So relations aren't that great compared to previous presidents in the Philippines. But for some, who have this classic neo-Marxist thinking, no, there's still that relationship. There's a rehimeng U.S. Duterte. U.S. is still holding us by the neck, and then we are okay with that. We concur with that, and that's fun, because I think that's false. For me, that's very extreme. That might have been true, yes, in the old days, but I don't think that's true anymore. When foreign countries, I may be biased, but when foreign countries provide assistance, they do it out of goodwill. There's some hidden agenda sometimes, but for the most part, they really mean well. And they don't need to exploit society. This one, it's sort of part of the dependency models. It's basically the poorer countries dependent on richer countries for advice or models. What to do? How can we develop ourselves better? How do we grow our pie better? How do we solve poverty? So the first paradigm model is all about, yes, we acknowledge that the advanced countries, they did something good. That's why they're more developed. They're in the fourth or fifth stage of the Rostov model, so to speak. The first paradigm model is what it's cautioning about is, does it mean that it worked, let's say, in the US or in Europe? Does it mean it will work here? And it's not just the foreigners, no? This paradigm also views the elites in our country, Filipinos, no? Not foreigners, as part of that foreign influence. Why? Because usually the elites, they're well connected, they have strong linkages to foreign countries. In the case of the Philippines, US. Diba, a lot of our senior politicians, senior business owners, they studied in the US. They learned models in the US. So the false paradigm model, what the model is saying, that's dangerous, because maybe what is happening is it's applying, it's the foreigners and the elites applying what worked elsewhere into our country, and sometimes it's not applicable, sometimes it doesn't work. There's a classic example that really happened, and it wreaked havoc in Latin America, not necessarily here. In the 80s, I think 1980s, there was this was led by two international institutions called they're called the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank, IMF, International Monetary Fund. They were more hardline before, no? Now I share videos produced by the World Bank and IMF. Now they're more open, because before they thought they knew everything, and whatever worked here will work elsewhere. They implemented a set of principles or interventions called the Washington Consensus. Why Washington Consensus? Because they were based in Washington, D.C., not Washington State, but Washington District of Columbia, where the White House is. That's the center of power in the U.S., by the way. So they applied, the Latin American countries were facing troubles, high debt, recessions, etc., contractions, the economic pie, they were getting smaller. So they said, oh, this worked in the US, in Europe, we'll apply it here. So some of them are in general good, no? But for example, trade liberalization. What does that mean? You don't have to be familiar with all of this. I just provided that this as an example. So, for example, trade liberalization. They told Latin American countries, and these were all applied more or less at the same time, no? All of these policies. Oh, trade liberalization, you open up your country to imports immediately. You don't know grace period, you don't know no 1 year to adjust. No, open it up. So what happened was, okay, we'll do that. You don't have to deal with tariffs and quotas. No? That's economic terms. But okay, we'll open up. What happened in some Latin American countries? Their domestic businesses suffered because they opened up too soon. A lot of people got laid off. It was the foreign exports, the foreign goods that became winners at the expense of the domestic industries. Because again, it was a false paradigm. It was the wrong thing to do. It was not, the countries were not prepared for it, like Chile, but they were forced, they accepted, they thought these were experts, but oops, mali pala. And that brings us back to our favorite cartoon. And I wrote this too in Canvas. So let's start with let's have a sarcastic example. So let's say, for example, and this is applicable, let's say for your final integrated output because it's livelihood, diba? Let's say in a particular community, Palawan, for example, there's a lot of bodies of water. The people don't have skills in terms of fishing. So one example is, for example, let's have a program. Let's introduce fishing, or let's teach fishing as a livelihood to them. Let's teach them the proper ways, really great techniques, what rod to use, etc. So we'll teach them fishing. Give a man a fish, feed for a day, but teach them fishing, it will be sustainable. And in some communities in Palawan, that is great, well and good. So, for example, you introduce that, people were able to feed their families, become richer. They were able to sell they have lobsters, by the way, in Palawan, local lobsters. So, if you're the development person, great, sige. Fishing is the solution to everything. Okay, now I go to Baguio. Baguio is asking me, the mayor is asking me, what can we do in Baguio to help the poor people here? I say, no, let's introduce fishing. What do you think will happen? Wala, diba? Because it's not applicable. I mean, that's a very simple example, a sarcastic example. Or even, even in your NSTP areas, no? If it's in Metro Manila, let's say Rizal, you introduce fishing, it's not applicable. Diba? Of course, some areas in Rizal, maybe, there are bodies, but make sure it's applicable. That's the lesson to be learned in the false paradigm. In many ways, the experts, international experts, there's value naman. We're not saying completely disregard the good experiences. No, you learn from them, but make sure that you study well whether it will work here. That's basically what the false paradigm is cautioning. Okay, to end Module 3, we go back to your sustainability angle, which was also a huge part in Module 1, the SDGs. It's all about sustainability. So here, I won't really talk a lot about this because some of you haven't posted on your Dino walls yet. I'll just provide a basic gist. So this is a cool way of illustrating this. Basically echoing what Dr. Sachs mentioned. But there's an additional value that Kate Raworth actually provided. Well, she basically said, again, the inner circle, it's basically our shortfall. It's what we need to provide. But going back to what we learned in Module 1, what she's also saying is, um, teka, so not at the expense, no, of what she calls ecological ceilings. You know, maybe you'll in most developed countries, you know, you continue to use coal to for manufacturing, di ba? To provide energy for manufacturing, but that leads to climate change. So be cognizant, no, of that ceiling. No? It's not providing all of these, providing incomes, economic growth for growth's sake, but also being cognizant, recognizing that there are limits. Do no harm to the extent possible, because you might overshoot when you're trying uh, to fill the shortfall, fill the gap. So her value for me, no, is this. She was advocating for a more regenerative and distributive economy. In the development world, in my field, no, we have what we call mainstreaming. When you say you mainstream something, it's you, it's not thinking of something separate, but integrating that concept into your intervention. So for example, simple example, you want to provide energy, diba? So that your manufacturing can continue. But if you design in such a way that it's renewable energy, then you just don't respect the ceiling. But you mainstream something that's good for the environment, and it becomes regenerative. Distributive is just, you know, inequality. You know? So that's her main advocacy. Try to integrate it in the things you do, not just do no harm. Beyond being passive, you become more active. You integrate it, not just don't touch it. So and you saw the Singapore example, and I'll go into that. One of the good ways, one of the more emerging trends nowadays, especially in advanced countries, is what we call the circular economy. Even when you see a can, no, there's sort of like a triangle of arrows. That means recycle. That means, you know, you create, recreate. It's circular. And the best example for me is Singapore here. That's why I posted it on Canvas. So for example, renewable energy, you know, as I mentioned, no, solar or wind. You create energy and take care of the environment actively, no? While at the same time providing energy to businesses and households. And at the same time, you create another industry. And that means jobs. Because who will build the solar panels? Who will build the wind farms? People. Then you give livelihood. So integrated siya. It's a whole package. The good thing about Singapore, I'm not sure if I pointed to this specifically in Canvas. In Singapore, you know, a best example for me is when you flush the water that you use in your toilets, when you poop or pee and you flush it, eventually people will drink it. They have found a way because Singapore is not known to have a lot of natural resources. So scarcity, they always say, is the mother of, or desperation or scarcity is the mother of creativity or innovation. So they found a way using technology, you know, they clean up, they recycle the water that's flushed or used. Gray water, they call it. So the water that you use when you flush, when you poop, you drink that eventually. It's recycled. So that's for me the best, most optimal example of a circular economy. It goes around. You renew the resource. All right, no questions so far. So that ends module 3. I, I can answer questions if you have any, no? Before we move on to a short introduction to module 4. I don't see anyone in the chat box.
Sir, I have a question lang.
Sige, Jericho, go ahead.
Can you, yung donut kanina, could you give an example po? Yung parang, yung do no harm, if I'm not mistaken. That one, sir. Like, what is,
Do no harm. Do no harm. What is do no harm? Do no harm kasi is it's avoiding. Ano ba? What's another? Let's use this. No? Kasi yung renewable energy that's actually going beyond do no harm. Kasi do no harm is passive. Let's see. Okay. So ito, housing. Diba, I don't know if you follow the news. No? There have been some complaints because our population is getting bigger. What they're saying is, some agricultural lands are being converted into urban lands. You can do that. There's a process for converting. So the land that could be used to produce food is now becoming transformed. That's becoming a phenomenon. So if you're a housing, you're a subdivision developer, you're cognizant about that. You're saying, no, I will not try to harm the environment. I will not try to touch. I will not try to convert the land. No? I will stick to finding lands that are urban lands. Pero kasi yung iba, if they don't respect do no harm, sige, I will just convert any land. No? I will make money and give people housing. So that's an example of do no harm. You avoid, pero yung actively mainstreaming it. Yun, example is by delivering the service, you're addressing an environmental issue already. So renewable energy, climate change, diba? You're trying to address it actively. Does that answer your question, Jericho?
thank you, sir.
Okay. So yun lang. So it's a tension between passive and ano pa bang example nito sa Ateneo? Same thing in Ateneo. No? So sa Ateneo, you can do the same thing. For example, ano ba maganda? Yun. So ito, very, very clear example. So you don't want to litter. Diba? So what I'll do is, you want to avoid waste, no? or littering on campus or pollution on campus. So what you do, ganito na lang. So ito extreme example, just to be creative. Going back to clean energy again, you don't want to if it's passive, instead of bringing a car, kasi we are concerned about air pollution, etc., then you just won't bring a car to school. No? Makikihitch ka or you'll take public transportation. So do no harm. Don't add to the pollution. Pero if you want to be more active, you're rich, your parents are rich, you'll buy an electric car or you'll buy a Tesla, for example, and you're addressing an environmental issue and at the same time, you're finding a way to go to school. So parang ganun. So it's avoiding to further hurt or add burden to the environment versus, no, I will promote a better environment by integrating it into something I do. Parang. All right, any more questions before we go to module 4 and finish up? All right. I think these are the last two slides. So in Module 4, I hope some of you have started Module 4. No? I wanted to give you a taste of how government, all governments, even in the past, do some sort of planning, which forms the framework of their policies and plans and interventions. It's called the PDP, the Philippine Development Plan. In the past, that's called the Medium-Term Philippine Development Plan. Now it's now shortened to PDP. It's usually done by each administration for the duration of their term. So here it's 2017 to 2022 kasi of course each administration takes over in the middle of the year, July, diba? June 30 yung kanilang inauguration. They need of course time to formulate. So they spend the first 6 months and then it's the next 5 years. That's the time frame or duration of that plan. If we had more time, as I said in Canvas, we can really talk about all of these boxes, all of these elements. But I just wanted to give you a taste. So that's why I introduced Module 4 with the general framework found in the PDP. So as you saw on Module 1, there's ambition. No? There's that vision that Filipinos aspire for. Matatag, maginhawa, panatag na buhay. You know? And basically what this government wants to contribute to that long-term vision is three things. No? These three boxes. These are the major ones. So malasakit, that's all the social stuff. No? People-centered, all of your safety nets, for peace, etc. Pagbabago, you know, inequality, reducing transformation, giving people more jobs, better jobs. Human capital is there. We talked about that, health, human, you know, vulnerability, safety nets. And then the growth potential, patuloy na pag-unlad. How do you infuse technology? Again, stimulate investments, innovation, you know, and then use government revenues smartly. So in Module 4, we'll talk about these three things. So when we talk about agriculture and SMEs, small, medium enterprises, and even the micro enterprises, we're talking about contributing to this. You want to expand economic opportunities. You want to increase access to economic opportunities. You want to help people. What's good with SMEs? Because SMEs, of course, it solves two things. No? Kaya maganda yung negosyo. It solves two things. One is, you find a job for yourself. That's one. You solve your own problem with finding a job. Number two, you also employ people. Diba? So it's actually really good. Versus, I just get a job. So it's only one person. Here, it's more than one person benefiting. Agriculture, same thing. You know, agriculture, as you'll see in the first part of Module 4, most of the poor are in the rural areas. So how do you provide economic opportunities in the countryside? So the first and the fourth topics in Module 4 speak to this. No? The economic opportunities angle. Then we'll also talk about fiscal policy. Fiscal, when you hear the word fiscal, it just means either government revenue or government spending. That's fiscal. We'll also talk about that because government spending is important. And policies related to government revenue generation as well as spending, that affects the economy. That affects a lot of people as well. So we learned that. That's your second topic. And the third one is demographics and population. Demography is basically just a study of population dynamics. So that's also an interesting topic because we're already, I think, top 10 most populous countries in the world. So what are the implications? When you say demographic dividend, you'll learn more in Module 4. It's basically realizing that, most of the people in the Philippines now, if you do an analysis, we're a young population in general terms. Most of the people are young and working level. Is that good or bad? What are the benefits? What are the downsides? You'll learn more in Module 4. So again, really, as you realize, maybe when you open Module 4, you said, what the hell? Such a long agriculture piece, no? And really, that's really important because agriculture, besides being my favorite topic in a sense in development, I'm sort of the de facto agriculture point person in our office. It's really, there's a lot of elements in agriculture, especially agrarian reform. That's a very thorny topic, and there's a lot of debate. And I'm looking forward to the output of the rice tariffication group as well, because for all the policies I assigned to you guys, I have my own take on them. So I'm interested in getting your take. So as you'll see in Canvas later, the population and demography, that's a short sub-module. SME development, that's really very short. So again, it's up to you how you want to manage Module 4 and the other modules. You can share in the load. You can even share with my other class, Management D. My beadle there is Joaquim, forgot his last name, and Monica Martinez, I think. Yeah, so you can even share the load with the other class if you want. So you can find the way. But ideally, if you find it useful and interesting, you will go through all the readings yourselves and the videos. But don't forget to comment on the discussion boards. Because again, 20% of your grades will be coming from your active participation in the discussion boards. All right. Any other questions before we call it a night? Before you guys have dinner, before I have dinner too. Again, you guys consultation hours. Feel free. I'm sure some groups will be consulting with me probably next week before the deadline for the next assignment. By the way, let's play by ear. I said the deadline for assignment 2 is October 19. Who knows, I might be kind enough to grant an extension. We'll see. I'll play by ear. But I appreciate you guys reaching out to me through Andre about your concerns about being overwhelmed. I'm open again to constructive feedback. I might not necessarily say yes, sige, I'll remove certain sections, but I'll try to help you guys. But again, my last point is you guys are smart. That's why I keep a high bar with my students. I have high standards because I know the capacity of Ateneans, being an Atenean myself. So kaya-kaya niya. Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the evening and the week. Thanks for your patience, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, would you be
Sure, sige.
giving the scores for the first as homework, the assignment, the paper?
By next week, most likely. Siguro by Monday or so. Yeah.
Sige, sir. Thank you
Sige.
po.
Also swap with others.
Sir, sir, uh, is it okay if I ask an
Andre,
additional
if you can,
question?
if you can stay, kasi there's.
Sige
Go
po.
ahead. Go ahead. You have questions. I just want us to have more than 2 people
Okay, sir.
comply with that. So if Andre can. Sige.
Sir, I guess regarding the previous slides, the one where you showed that agriculture, the arrow with agriculture, manufacturing, and service. I'm just confused lang about how manufacturing, how a country who's more dominantly more dominantly invested in the manufacturing sector transitions to services. Uh, I guess I was
Uh,
confused as
okay.
how the Philippines jumped to the service sector so quickly.
Okay. That's a good point, no? And that goes deeper into economics. What usually happens is you build a strong manufacturing base. No? So a lot of factories, a lot of sectors. You know, you're into electronics, you're into agri manufacturing, etc. Uh, Services kasi usually they grow from manufacturing as well, because if you have a lot of businesses. Kasi services, you have financial services, you have people being more affluent, so you have a lot of, let's say, luxury services, tourism services. So it naturally, in advanced countries, the growth in services is an offshoot of what happens in manufacturing. Kasi yun nga, the banks start need it, kumbaga the banks need to expand because the businesses need financial services, the businesses need other types of businesses, logistics, shipping, you name it, janitorial services, to support manufacturing. Diba? Doon nag-grow yung services in advanced countries. It is because of manufacturing that the services component grows. In the Philippines, baliktad. So, because of our sheer population size, we jump, no? Kaya lumaki yung services natin is because sa dami natin, kahit wala tayong strong manufacturing base, because of sheer consumption, maraming tao, then businesses started sprouting, mga malls, di ba, offering services. Tourism natin, at its own, let's say tourism is growing because of foreigners, not because of manufacturing. And they're saying hindi yun necessarily sustainable. Kailangan mag-grow siya as a result of manufacturing. Tayo din, we jumped it. And most of the services we do are consumption-driven. Yun nga yung sinasabi natin in the previous class. Hindi kasi deep pag consumption-driven. Pag yung services mo ay financial services, pero to support housing, to support car loans, etc., hindi siya kasing solid. I don't know if it's making sense. Kasi this one is actually a complex matter. Pero what you have to remember lang is, kumbaga hilaw, Tagalogin ko na hilaw, to make it easier for me also to articulate, hilaw siya pag you jump to manufacturing, to services. Kasi hindi siya as a result of your robust manufacturing. Kasi manufacturing really is the one that gives you jobs, drives job generation. You see statistics. I think in module 4 may statistics pa yun. And then eventually, the services, parang support siya, support services to manufacturing. Mas sustainable siya. Rather than nauna siya. Hilaw siya, parang mas bitin, mas kumbaga hindi gano'ng kaganda yung quality of the economic services. So, parang gano'n.
Thank you, sir. It's more clear now.
Sorry if it's kasi yeah, I hope it's more clear. Pero sige, I'll try to research and are you Doreen or Ann? Mas Ann ka ba or Doreen?
And second name ko lang yung Doreen.
Okay. So Ann, I'll try to search for a helpful article and share it with other people kasi this topic might not be as clear. Kasi nga for economics people, parang we take this for granted kasi we know what's behind it. Pero this might be something new to other people,
Okay.
especially non-economics people.
Okay. Thank you.
Sige, I'll try to search easy to digest. Sige.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yan, okay. All right. All right. Thanks, Andre. Thanks also for staying. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, sir. Thank you.